Right now, as you watch this video, your brain is hiding reality from you, not metaphorically, not philosophically, literally. Neuroscience suggests that the world you believe you are seeing in this exact moment is not raw reality. It is a constructed model, a prediction, a carefully edited simulation generated by your nervous system milliseconds before you become consciously aware of it, which means something deeply unsettling becomes possible. You may have never experienced reality directly even once in your entire life. Everything you call the world may actually be your brain's best guess about what reality probably is. And if that sounds impossible, consider this: your eyes are blind in several places right now, but your brain fills in the missing information so seamlessly that you never notice. Colors do not exist objectively in the outside world, yet your mind paints them across existence as if they were physically there. Your memories constantly rewrite themselves every time you recall them. Your attention edits what enters consciousness and what disappears into psychological darkness. In other words, the version of reality you experience is already filtered before you even begin thinking about it. But this is where the story becomes stranger. Quantum physics discovered something disturbing about observation itself. At the smallest scales of existence, particles behave differently when observed. The famous double-slit experiment revealed that matter changes behavior depending on whether information about it is being measured. The observer changes the outcome. For decades, scientists argued about what this really means. Some insisted consciousness has nothing to do with it. Others believed the implications were impossible to ignore. But today, another terrifying question emerges from the intersection of neuroscience and quantum theory. If consciousness affects reality through observation, and your consciousness is already filtering reality before you perceive it, then what exactly are you shaping every single day without realizing it? Because maybe the observer effect is not just happening in laboratories. Maybe it is happening inside your own mind every second. Maybe your fears alter what opportunities you notice. Maybe your expectations silently shape what outcomes become psychologically real. Maybe your attention acts less like a camera and more like a spotlight deciding which version of reality is emotionally amplified. And maybe the life you are living right now is partially constructed by a hidden rendering system operating beneath awareness. Think about how two people can walk through the exact same experience and come out with completely different realities. One person sees rejection, another sees growth. One person sees proof the world is dangerous, another sees proof the world is full of possibility. One conversation destroys someone's confidence while inspiring another person completely. The external event stays the same. The internal rendering changes everything, which means reality is not merely received. It is interpreted, assembled, emotionally colored, prioritized, predicted, and reconstructed by the brain before consciousness even enters the scene. Your mind is not passively watching reality, it is actively generating it. And the craziest part is that most people never realize this process is happening. They assume they see the world objectively. They assume their perception is reality itself. But perception is not reality. Perception is a controlled hallucination stabilized by prediction. Modern neuroscience increasingly supports something called predictive processing. According to this theory, your brain is not waiting for reality to arrive through your senses. Instead, it constantly predicts what reality should look like and then compares incoming sensory data against those predictions. This means your brain is essentially guessing reality into existence moment by moment. You are not seeing the world first and interpreting it second. Your brain is interpreting first and showing you the result afterward. This changes everything, because once you understand this, you begin noticing something terrifying hiding beneath daily life. Most people are not reacting to reality itself. They are reacting to internal models of reality built from memory, fear, trauma, expectation, social conditioning, and emotional prediction. Two people do not merely have different opinions. They may literally inhabit different psychological realities. Imagine someone who was betrayed repeatedly in childhood. Their nervous system becomes hyper-focused on danger signals. Their predictive model begins expecting abandonment before connection even occurs. Then one day, someone takes slightly longer than usual to reply to a message. An ordinary brain might interpret nothing significant, but a predictive brain trained by fear suddenly generates emotional certainty. They are losing interest. They secretly dislike me. I am about to be abandoned again. The brain fills in missing data before objective evidence even appears. And once that emotional rendering activates, the body responds as though the imagined threat is real. Heart rate changes. Stress hormones rise. Behavior shifts. The person becomes colder, anxious, defensive, withdrawn. Then something incredible happens. The other person senses the emotional distance and actually begins pulling away. The prediction starts creating the very outcome it feared, not through magic. Through perception-driven behavior. The brain rendered reality before reality finished unfolding. Now expand this process across entire societies. Political beliefs, religious identity. Economic fear, media narratives, social expectations. Every human being walks through existence using invisible mental filters that determine what becomes emotionally important and what disappears unnoticed. This is where the Reticular Activating System enters the picture. The Reticular Activating System, or RAS, acts like a neurological gatekeeper. Your brain receives millions of bits of information every second, but your conscious mind can only process a tiny fraction of it. So the RAS decides what deserves attention based on what your brain believes matters most. This means your beliefs literally influence what reality you notice. Have you ever bought a car and suddenly started seeing that exact model everywhere? The cars were always there, your attention changed. Have you ever become obsessed with a fear and suddenly noticed evidence of it everywhere? Again, the world did not suddenly transform overnight. Your internal filter shifted. Attention edits reality, not objectively perhaps, but experientially, and experience is the only reality your nervous system truly knows. This is why people trapped in hopelessness often become unable to perceive opportunities directly in front of them. Their rendering system filters possibility out before conscious awareness even notices it. Meanwhile, someone else sees pathways everywhere. Not because the universe favors them necessarily, but because their internal model permits those pathways to become visible. This is one reason optimism can become self-reinforcing, not because positive thinking magically bends physics, but because attention reorganizes behavioral reality. You notice different opportunities. You take different actions. You radiate different emotional signals. You tolerate uncertainty differently. And slowly, the world begins responding differently to you. The observer participates in shaping the observed. Suddenly the observer effect stops feeling abstract. It becomes deeply personal, because every moment of attention is also a moment of selection. Every thought emotionally reinforced becomes neurologically prioritized. Every fear repeatedly rehearsed strengthens predictive pathways. Every expectation quietly trains perception. And most terrifying of all, your brain prefers being correct over being free. If your identity depends on believing you are unlucky, invisible, rejected, powerless, or broken, your perception system will unconsciously gather evidence supporting that narrative, not because reality objectively proves it, because the brain protects coherence. Your mind would rather preserve a familiar suffering than risk an unfamiliar freedom. This is why changing your life often feels psychologically threatening even when the change is positive, because a new reality requires a new rendering system, and your brain resists rewriting itself. Optical illusions expose this beautifully. There are famous illusions where two lines of identical length appear completely different, because surrounding context manipulates perception. Even after measuring the lines and proving they are equal, your brain still refuses to see them accurately. Knowledge alone cannot override perception instantly. Your rendering system remains stronger than logic. Now imagine how many invisible illusions operate psychologically instead of visually. What if your self-image is partially an illusion stabilized by repetition? What if your assumptions about other people are filtered projections? What if your understanding of reality is heavily edited by emotional conditioning you never consciously chose. And what if millions of people are living inside invisible cognitive prisons without realizing the walls are internal? This is where things become darker, because if perception can shape reality psychologically, then controlling attention becomes one of the most powerful forces on Earth. And modern systems understand this extremely well. Social media platforms do not merely compete for your time. They compete to shape your rendering engine. Every notification trains your dopamine system. Every algorithm learns what captures your emotional attention. Every outrage cycle strengthens specific perceptual pathways. Over time, your nervous system becomes conditioned to expect stimulation, conflict, novelty, validation, fear, comparison, and emotional volatility. The more attention something receives, the more neurologically real it becomes. This means technology may simply be influencing behavior, but it may be reshaping perception itself. Your attention is no longer entirely your own, and whoever controls attention partially controls reality construction. Think about that carefully. If your brain builds reality based on repeated focus, and algorithms determine repeated focus, then algorithms may indirectly influence the reality you experience emotionally, psychologically, and behaviorally, not by changing objective existence, by changing what your nervous system renders as important. That is an entirely different level of power, and most people never notice it happening because the process feels natural from the inside. A fish rarely notices water. A mind rarely notices its own filters. But once you begin seeing the machinery beneath perception, ordinary life starts feeling strange. You realize most arguments are not collisions between facts. They are collisions between rendering systems. You realize memory is unstable. Identity is flexible. Attention is programmable. Fear is contagious. Expectation alters perception. And reality itself feels far less solid than you once believed. Then the deepest question arrives. If your brain is constantly editing reality before you see it, who are you beneath the editing system? Maybe the most dangerous illusion humans have ever believed is the idea that consciousness is passive. We assume we simply open our eyes and witness reality exactly as it is. We imagine perception as a neutral window pointed toward an objective world. But the deeper neuroscience digs into the structure of awareness, the more unsettling the truth becomes. Consciousness does not passively receive reality. It actively constructs an interpretation of reality in real time. And once you understand this, the observer effect stops being a strange scientific phenomenon and starts becoming a terrifying mirror pointed directly at human existence. Because if observation changes outcomes at the quantum level, then attention may be one of the most powerful forces shaping human experience. The famous double-slit experiment shattered the classical understanding of reality. When particles like electrons are not measured, they behave like waves of probability, existing in multiple potential states at once. But the moment observation enters the system, the wave collapses into a single measurable outcome. Potential becomes reality through interaction. For decades, physicists debated what observation actually means in this context. Some argued consciousness is irrelevant and measurement devices alone collapse the wave function. Others believed awareness itself may play a deeper role than modern science is comfortable admitting. But regardless of interpretation, one thing became impossible to ignore. Reality, at its deepest level, does not behave independently from observation in the way humans once assumed. And strangely, the human brain behaves similarly. Your nervous system constantly operates within fields of possibility before selecting a final conscious experience. Before you consciously see something, your brain predicts what should be there. Before you consciously hear words, your brain anticipates patterns. Before you consciously understand events, your mind constructs emotional meaning. Consciousness is less like a camera and more like a reality selection engine. Don't think about how quickly your mind labels people. Within seconds of meeting someone, your brain begins constructing assumptions. Safe, dangerous, intelligent, weak, attractive, threatening, trustworthy. Your conscious mind believes It is analyzing reality objectively, but most of these judgments happen automatically beneath awareness through predictive pattern recognition systems built from memory and conditioning. In other words, your brain is not discovering reality. It is comparing incoming information against previously learned models. This is why trauma can distort perception so profoundly. A traumatized nervous system does not simply remember pain, it anticipates pain before it arrives. And anticipation changes perception. Someone who experienced humiliation repeatedly may interpret neutral social interactions as hostile. Someone raised in chaos may unconsciously feel uncomfortable in peace, because their nervous system predicts danger when calmness appears unfamiliar. The brain keeps rendering reality according to survival patterns learned years earlier, not because those patterns remain true, because predictive systems prioritize familiarity over accuracy. This creates an invisible prison. Most people believe they are responding to life. In reality, they are often responding to predictions generated by old emotional software. And this becomes even more disturbing once we combine it with attention itself, because attention does not merely observe experience. Attention strengthens experience. Neuroscience shows that repeated attention physically rewires neural pathways. The more frequently certain thought patterns activate, the stronger those networks become. Your brain becomes more efficient at producing the same emotional realities repeatedly. This means the mind literally trains itself into specific versions of reality over time. Fear rehearsed daily becomes perceptual sensitivity to danger. Self-doubt rehearsed daily becomes heightened awareness of rejection. Anger rehearsed daily becomes hyper-detection of disrespect. Gratitude rehearsed daily increases recognition of positive signals. Your reality changes because your nervous system changes what it notices, expects, amplifies, and emotionally prioritizes. This is where the observer effect becomes psychologically explosive, because perhaps observation is not just about particles in laboratories. Perhaps attention itself alters human reality through neurological reinforcement. The more energy consciousness gives something, the more psychologically real it becomes. And modern civilization understands this far better than most individuals realize. Entire industries compete for human attention because attention is the gateway into perception. The moment something captures sustained attention, it begins entering the architecture of subjective reality. This is why fear-based media is so powerful. If people constantly observe danger, conflict, outrage, collapse, humiliation, division, and anxiety, their nervous systems begin rendering reality through those emotional filters automatically. Over time, the brain starts predicting negativity before events even unfold. The observer becomes conditioned into expecting suffering, and expectation subtly shapes behavior. Behavior shapes outcomes. Outcomes reinforce expectation. The cycle deepens. Now imagine millions of minds trapped in synchronized fear loops, generated through algorithmic amplification. This is no longer psychology. It becomes collective reality engineering. Social media platforms discovered something extraordinary about human consciousness. Negative emotional stimulation holds attention longer than neutral content. Fear spreads faster than peace. Outrage spreads faster than nuance. Conflict spreads faster than understanding. So algorithms optimize for emotional intensity because intensity increases engagement. But every piece of content repeatedly consumed strengthens neurological pathways inside the observer, which means digital systems are not merely distributing information, they're shaping perception architecture itself. The terrifying part is that most people mistake algorithmically guided attention for independent thought. They believe they are freely perceiving reality, while invisible systems continuously influence what becomes psychologically visible. And because perception shapes emotional experience, these systems indirectly shape reality as lived by consciousness. This is reality hijacking at the level of attention. The observer effect becomes industrialized. But long before algorithms existed, the human mind already possessed its own internal manipulation systems. Cognitive biases constantly distort perception. Without conscious awareness, confirmation bias pushes the brain to seek evidence supporting existing beliefs. Negativity bias makes painful experiences more psychologically dominant than positive ones. Availability bias causes recent emotional memories to feel statistically more real than they actually are. Your mind is not objective. It is strategic. It evolved for survival, not truth, and survival systems prioritize speed over accuracy. This means your perception of reality is often built from shortcuts, assumptions, emotional predictions, incomplete data, and neurological efficiencies operating beneath conscious awareness. The human brain edits existence constantly. For most of human history, reality manipulation sounded like mythology. Ancient civilizations imagined gods controlling perception. Religions warned about illusion. Philosophers questioned whether reality itself could even be trusted. Mystics claimed ordinary consciousness was asleep inside a deeper dream. But today, something strange is happening. Modern neuroscience, behavioral psychology, algorithmic technology, and attention economics are beginning to converge toward the same terrifying realization. Human perception is programmable. Not perfectly, not completely, but far more than most people are comfortable admitting. And once perception becomes programmable, reality itself becomes vulnerable because human beings do not experience objective existence directly. They experience rendered interpretations filtered through consciousness. This means the greatest battle of the modern age may not be over territory, money, or information. It may be over attention itself, because attention determines what becomes psychologically real. Look carefully at modern life. Every platform fights to capture focus. Every notification interrupts awareness. Every advertisement competes to implant emotional associations. Every headline is engineered to provoke immediate reaction. And the more emotionally reactive people become, the easier their perception becomes to guide. Fear narrows awareness. Anger simplifies complexity. Anxiety increases suggestibility. Dopamine loops reduce reflective thinking. This creates populations that react quickly, but rarely observe deeply. And that matters because a mind trapped in constant stimulation loses the ability to notice its own rendering process. It becomes hypnotized by the outputs, while remaining unconscious of the system producing them. Imagine standing inside a movie theater your entire life, without realizing there is a projector behind you. You become emotionally consumed by the images on the screen, while never questioning the mechanism generating them. That is how most people live psychologically. They identify completely with thoughts, emotions, social narratives, digital stimulation, fears, identities, and predictive assumptions without ever examining the hidden architecture underneath. But once you begin seeing the projector, the illusion weakens. You realize how easily perception can be manipulated through repetition, how identities can be engineered through emotional conditioning, how collective fear can alter entire societies, how attention itself can become a weapon. This is where the observer effect becomes darker than most people imagine, because if attention influences psychological reality, then controlling collective attention may indirectly shape collective behavior at enormous scale. And history provides chilling examples. Entire nations have been emotionally mobilized through repeated narratives. Propaganda works because repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity feels true to the brain even when information is false. The nervous system confuses repetition with reality. The observer slowly becomes conditioned to perceive the world through implanted frameworks. This is why mass fear spreads so effectively. When millions of people repeatedly observe danger, collapse, scarcity, humiliation, or division, those emotional realities become neurologically dominant. People begin behaving according to perceived threats. Trust decreases, anxiety rises, aggression spreads, social fragmentation intensifies. Eventually, the internal rendering alters external civilization itself. Thought shapes behavior. Behavior shapes systems. Systems reinforce thought. The cycle feeds itself. But perhaps the most dangerous manipulation is not fear. It is distraction, because a distracted mind rarely questions itself. Modern attention systems keep consciousness externally stimulated almost every waking moment. Silence disappears, reflection disappears, deep observation disappears. People scroll endlessly through fragments of emotional stimulation without realizing their nervous systems are being trained continuously. Shorter attention spans, higher emotional reactivity, lower tolerance for stillness, reduced introspection. The rendering engine becomes increasingly automated and externally influenced, and once someone loses awareness of their own attention, they gradually lose authorship over their reality, because where attention goes, neurological energy follows, and where neurological energy flows repeatedly, perception solidifies. This is why many people feel emotionally exhausted even when physically safe. Their nervous systems remain trapped inside endless cycles of artificial urgency generated by digital environments. The brain evolved for survival in immediate physical environments, not non-stop exposure to global outrage, comparison, stimulation, conflict, tragedy, and information overload. But the nervous system cannot fully distinguish between direct danger and vividly consumed psychological danger. So the body reacts. Stress hormones rise, attention narrows, fear loops strengthen, reality begins feeling hostile even when no immediate threat exists. And slowly, perception itself darkens. The observer starts expecting chaos automatically. This expectation then changes behavior in subtle ways. People become less trusting. Less creative, less emotionally available, less capable of uncertainty, more reactive, more tribal, more psychologically rigid. Again, the rendering engine alters external outcomes. This is why two individuals can live in the same city, use the same technology, and occupy the same historical moment while experiencing completely different realities emotionally. One person becomes consumed by fear and hopelessness. Another develops awareness and psychological sovereignty. The external world remains similar. The internal rendering diverges radically. This may be the hidden dividing line emerging in the modern age. Not intelligence, not wealth, awareness, the ability to observe your own mind without immediately becoming controlled by it. The ability to notice when algorithms hijack attention. The ability to separate emotional stimulation from objective truth. The ability to recognize predictive fear before it becomes identity. The ability to consciously reclaim the observer, because maybe the most important freedom is not political. Maybe it is perceptual. And this brings us back to the deepest question, hidden inside the observer effect itself. Who is the observer beneath all conditioning? Strip away social programming. Strip away fear. Strip away memory. Strip away digital stimulation. Strip away predictive identity. What remains? Most people never discover the answer because they spend their entire lives hypnotized by mental activity, thought after thought, reaction after reaction, prediction after prediction. The mind keeps rendering reality automatically, while consciousness remains identified with the process. But occasionally something interrupts the pattern. A moment of stillness, a shock, a deep meditation, a personal crisis, a sudden realization. And for one brief instant, the observer notices the system itself. In that moment, consciousness no longer feels fused with thought. It becomes aware of thought. That distinction changes everything, because if you can observe your mind, then you are not identical to every thought your mind produces. If you can notice fear, then fear is not your deepest identity. If you can watch emotional reactions arise and pass, then consciousness exists at a deeper level than temporary mental states. This realization appears again and again across neuroscience, psychology, philosophy, and contemplative traditions. Awareness itself may be more fundamental than the constantly shifting contents of awareness. And perhaps this is why humans have always been obsessed with the mystery of consciousness, because deep down, we sense something profoundly strange about perception. We sense that reality feels unfinished until experienced. We sense that attention changes experience. We sense that expectation alters behavior. We sense that identity shapes perception. We sense that thoughts influence emotion, and emotion influences action, and action influences life itself. The observer participates in reality, not as a magical god controlling the universe with thoughts alone, but as an active participant shaping experience through attention, interpretation, prediction, emotion, and behavior. That is already extraordinary enough. And maybe this is the true hidden observer effect inside human consciousness. The mind is not a mirror reflecting reality perfectly. It is a rendering engine constructing a usable world model from incomplete information. But once you become conscious of the rendering process, a new possibility emerges. You can begin editing the editor. You can question assumptions before they solidify. You can interrupt fear loops before they become identity. You can reclaim attention from systems competing to control it. You can observe thoughts without automatically obeying them. You can become aware of the filters shaping your perception, and slowly, reality begins changing, not because physics magically bends to every desire, but because perception changes behavior. Behavior changes decisions. Decisions change environments. Environments change possibilities. Possibilities change lives. The observer influences the observed. Maybe that has always been true. But perhaps the greatest illusion was never reality itself. Perhaps the greatest illusion was believing you were seeing reality clearly in the first place. Right now, your brain is still predicting the world around you, still filtering information. Still constructing experience, still editing reality before consciousness fully notices it. The question is whether you remain unconscious of that process, or whether you finally turn your attention toward the hidden system generating the world you call real. Because maybe freedom is not about escaping the simulation. Maybe freedom begins the moment you realize the simulation has been running inside your own mind all along. And maybe the most important thing you will ever learn is this: your eyes do not simply show you the world. Your consciousness tells reality what becomes visible.